thank you everyone for coming. Thank you for having us, Oscar, and the Revolution team. Take your time. We are the first panel, so give us a couple of seconds. Yeah, thank you everyone for coming, and thank you for the Revolution team for hosting us and for having this session. My name is Yotam Avrahami. I have two hats. Venture partner in New Vista Capital, investing in aerospace defense, mainly in the growth side of the group, and leading a next generation multifamily office that invests in growth in mobility and energy and cyber. So really excited to be here. We're going to do a quick introduction, and then we will jump right in, so from right to left, I think.
Great, thank you, Yotam. Thanks, everyone, for coming to this panel. My name is Colleen Reiki. I'm with Ernst & Young. I'm a senior manager with a focus on emerging mobility technology. So I sit within our technology consulting practice. So I know a lot of you probably think of Ernst & Young for tax and audit, but we do emerging technology and cool engineering stuff, too. So looking forward to the discussion. Thank you.
Thanks, Colleen. My name is Mark Osman. I'm the Chief Product Officer at Electra. We're developing a 9-passenger hybrid electric aircraft for the regional air mobility market. What's unique about our aircraft is that it can take off and land with 9 passengers on a 300-foot runway. And so we can get passengers closer to where they live, work, and play.
Good morning. My name is Keisuke Yasuko. So I'm from SkyDrive. SkyDrive is the eVTOL manufacturer from Japan. So we are building the multi-copter type eVTOLs at the moment. So we are trying to scale for the global market. And we have actually started the actual testing flight as well. So exciting news coming along.
Hi, I'm Matthew Gracek, and I'm the CEO of Aero Dynamics. And we've invented a new type of vertical takeoff and landing aircraft. If you've never seen our aircraft, I guarantee you've never seen anything like it. It takes off with the wings folded along the fuselage, and then right when it gets off the ground, the wings sort of unfold and rotate back, and it transitions into a fixed-wing aircraft. That's me.
Thank you so much. So first panel, I think, tackle a critical problem or a challenge that we're having in the aviation innovation market. I'm trying to be as inclusive as possible with the terminology. I will not say eVTOL or UAM or IAM, because I think a lot of you as OEMs have a different perspective, even on definition of how we want to focus on innovation in the aviation market. And I think the point we want to talk in this channel, in this discussion with you guys, is about the elephant in the room, the regulation problems, the certification process, how hard it is to do our certification process, what we learned from the last couple of years, because every year we're coming here and we're trying to answer and think together as a group on the main questions that will finally get us through the threshold of emerging technology to scale technology. How we can actually, and I'm as an investor waiting for that moment to come, and it's always moving to the right. So I think today, let's start with that question. From complex aviation problems and issues we had in the last 2 years on classical OEMs in aviation having a hard time to maintain safety and quality. How you guys, and I think, again, take it as a freestyle, are thinking about the next couple of years. Maybe the new regulation environment will be better. Maybe the new administration could be better on some elements or not. Or what can we take from the last year or last couple of years that maybe make us more optimistic towards the main question, when we'll see certification happen? Really broad stroke.
Yes, I can start. So I think the FAA is doing a great job on releasing the SFAR just released on a couple of months ago. So I think that's a great progress for the whole industry as a eVTOL manufacturing. Obviously, they are looking into the power lift, which will mainly focus on the US market. But for example, like our design, multi-copter design wasn't included, so it's included into the special rotorcraft certification as well. So hopefully, FAA will come to the sort of like guidelines for the special class rotorcraft as well. And also both EASA and ICAO and also the regulator like GCAA, they are looking into the harmonization of the regulation. That would be the crucial to the whole eVTOL industry as well, because everyone have different regulations at the moment and different sort of like operational guidelines. So hopefully it will come along with the certification processes as well.
I would just say that we all know that certification is really, really hard, right? Because no one's done it yet. Do we know how hard it is? We don't know because no one's done it yet. So we don't know where the end is of it. So it's profoundly challenging, I think. One of the ways, I think, that where we've seen things loosen up is people are operating at scale through waivers. You know, companies are doing hundreds of thousands of flights per year. We've seen it with Wing, we've seen it with Zipline, we've seen it with all kinds of companies internationally, but also increasingly here in the United States. So, you know, one of the things you can use to mitigate that is by going into the defense industry, for example. You're not working with certified aircraft, and you're dealing with a whole different kind of basis there. So for our company in particular, we've chosen those markets where we're not beholden to that. We're not dependent on that. We want to be in control of our own destiny, and so it's a challenge to have all these other things that you have to have all the other planets aligned for you to be successful. But not only is it a challenge to get certified, but it's a challenge even for the certification for FAA, EASA, and others just to define what is the path to certification. It's still they're getting more clarity, but I went to the first Uber Elevation or Uber I forget Uber Elevate conference in 2018, and we're going to be flying around in 2023 and 2024, and it seemed like a pipe dream then, and we still don't know where the end is. So it's hard, and we don't know how hard it is.
So I mentioned earlier, Electra is building a 9-passenger hybrid electric aircraft. It is a fixed-wing aircraft. It's just another aircraft, so it'll be certified under Part 23. It's got new technology in the form of new type of propulsion and the way we blow air over the wing, but at the end of the day, it's just an aircraft. And so, all of us are, except for you, I guess, Colleen, but we're all startups up here, and a startup wants to minimize risk as much as possible, but still bring something pretty exciting and compelling to market. So we look at market risk and technical risk, but regulatory risk in our business is, of course, a big risk. And so we want to do whatever we can to minimize that risk. And so by building a fixed-wing Part 23 aircraft, we've done a lot to really, I think, mitigate that risk and bring our development costs way down to a fraction of what it costs to bring an eVTOL to market. And as a team, we've actually been on the teams and led the teams that have built eVTOLs for Boeing and for Airbus and for Porsche. So we've been down that road before. We fully understand those risks. And as a result of that, have decided that bringing a fixed-wing aircraft to market is we think, sort of a more compelling approach. And so there's really no point in complaining about certification. It's actually a very necessary part of the process for the safety. Having been on several programs where it's like, oh, certification. Once we get certified, we're done, we're over, and everything. But actually, certification is just the beginning of like running a real business at that point. So certification is very necessary. Any startup that says, oh, we're going to change the regulatory process probably doesn't understand it. So if you're an investor and there's a company who says they can certify an aircraft much quicker than anybody else, they probably just don't know what they're getting themselves into. Most likely they don't come from aviation. And what I think is really interesting, Yotam, we should talk about this some more, is we're in 2024, which Matthew alluded to earlier, which is when everything was supposed to be flying, if you remember back a few years ago when we had the SPACs and everything. And here we are, and nothing is flying yet commercially. So certification is really something where you want to go into it thinking, how can you minimize it? How can you work with the existing process? How can you minimize the risk with the existing process? And really trying to create a business model where any of either the aircraft certification regulations or the operational regulations need to be changed for your business to be successful is very, very risky and takes a long, long time. So, the approach we're taking is to fit in with the regulatory process, bring something still very compelling to market that we think is an evolutionary approach. What's interesting is the investors want something revolutionary, something swing for the fences, but the aviation market and safety in general really want something more evolutionary. And so finding that combination is really tricky, and I think we found that. So anyway, that's our approach.
And I think dovetailing on the comment about the awareness and the understanding of the certification process, going in thinking, I can change this, I can make this happen. And I think one of the things that we've seen, again, as a consulting firm who's helping and trying to help all these different stakeholders, including regulatory agencies and government agencies from the federal to the state and local, is really in that transparency and not just talking about what our plans are, but really listening and having that transparency to understand what is the process. You know, on the inside of their regulatory agency, what is that process like? What is the workforce like? What barriers are they running into that prohibit them from being able to effectively swing for the fences, so to speak? It's not that they don't want to. You know, having talked to folks like that at conferences, in client relationships, et cetera, they want to. They're excited about this. But I think it's that limited knowledge that industry may have of exactly what the gears are, so to speak, of the certification process, and then vice versa, the regulators being able to understand the business objectives and the business implications of things shifting to the right. And I think having those transparent dialogues that, again, isn't just about, we want to do this, well, we want to do this, but let's listen and get that transparency. And that falls on everybody. That's not just on industry, but that's something we've seen related to that.
Amazing. Let's take some of the notes I think Mark made, Matthew, and Colin. And in the point I will leverage from your statement, Mark, revolution versus evolution. I think in the last couple of years, we're trying to see which approach will win. Do we have the ones that will try to change the whole wheel, or that slowly changing their concept of operation, trying to be more accurate towards the limitation of the certification process? You still want to be certified in a really safe manner, 1 to the minus whatever you want, depends on which continent you are. And then in the prospect of an investor, as I'm looking at each of your different configuration, and you as a consultant that tried to give us those insights, how do you see the difference between, okay, from an ROI even perspective, I will take it, I will change 10%, 20% every year. I will take my time. It will be capital intensive, but it will be aligned with the regulation structure that is currently in line, or change the regulation structure. From your perspective, each of your OEMs try to do it differently. So I would love to get the sense of what will be more suited to your product, how your product get to market faster, given the changes you will do with your product.
I would say that the right formula, and we see it in the market all the time, so you're talking about evolutionary versus revolutionary. It's revolutionary technology and evolutionary market, whether it's electricity, integrated circuits, combustion engines, aircraft. You want to have a revolutionary technology, but if you try to have a revolutionary market, you can't jump all the way to the 70th yard, on the field. You need to have, if you have the revolutionary technology, and you step on the field and you go incrementally, so that you can, if you're going after something revolutionary, we're seeing it in the air taxi market, for example, you need to raise many billions of dollars, right? I mean, Joby's raised, $4.4 billion. They don't have a certified aircraft. They'll probably need $5 billion on top of that in order to be able to get the cash flow positive, which is fine. Hopefully they'll do it. Uber raised $44 billion in the private market, and they make an app, right? So there's money available for great ideas. But I think that's the right formula. Revolutionary technology that introduced into the market in an evolutionary way, so you can take that first step, succeed at that, learn your lessons. We see it in software, so we see it everywhere. So I've never seen a technology or a platform where you have the revolutionary technology and the revolutionary market, and then they win. I don't know of anybody who's doing that.
So us SkyDrive is taking the much simpler approach than the other eVTOL companies. So obviously we have chosen the multi-copter type model because of the AW609 problem with the tilt wing, to be able to certify in first place. So we want to make the first model as simple as possible so we can make it to the actual market before we run out the funding as well. That's the sort of issue at the moment with the whole advanced air mobility industry. We are running out of the cash at the moment because of the sort of like long-term strategy as well. we cannot expect the VC or PE fund to invest into our companies because of the benefit on return is like much longer term than the shorter term returns. So that's the hard part for you guys, for the VCs, to invest into this kind of like industry at the moment. So we want to make it to the market as soon as possible with much simpler design. Also be the safest approach as well. So we can make it to the market, we can build use cases. There's all different applications. So we are focusing on sort of like short-term, short-distance applications like on tourism. UAM is sort of like in the future because there's still a lot of like regulatory framework and the challenges on the public perceptions as well to fly into the like sort of city areas as well. So hopefully we can start from the sort of like outskirts of the tourism, much needed sort of like emergency services as well. Then we can move on to the sort of like urban city areas as well.
Well, I say this whenever I get up on a panel, but I think it's really an exciting time to be in aviation right now, and I think everybody who's in this room recognizes that. You know, it's usually been the same kind of players, very high barriers to entry, and so what we've seen in the last, I don't know, probably 8 years is this confluence of new technology, you know, electric motors and batteries, and then the capital markets and Uber being a catalyst to kind of kick this whole thing off. It really has brought in a whole lot of new people into the industry, which means there's kind of new ways of thinking, a lot of naivete, but also just a lot of new exciting ideas too. So I think we're taking the most practical approach, but I really love the idea that so many people are looking at this in different ways, and some are looking at building aircraft and operating aircraft. They're certainly taking very different levels of risk in terms of certification. And so it's just exciting that all that's happening, right? That's what we do in a capitalist society, and it's really exciting to see that. So in terms of certification, I think we want to take the most risk-averse approach to that, which is what we're doing as a startup, and in terms of cost to get to market and risks and everything that investors want to see us mitigate. But it certainly doesn't mean that the others should be ignored. I don't want to come across as saying anything bad about the other approaches. I think they're just much more risky. This is the path we've chosen, but a big picture, it's really exciting to see multiple companies, a bunch of new entrants, different people taking different paths, and that should be celebrated.
Yeah, and I think, I mean, from a revolution angle perspective, I think the breakdown, as Matt, as you were describing, of sort of the evolution of things, I think, and I might be jumping the gun here a little bit with the mission discussion, but I think something we've seen with a lot of folks in this space is sort of, you know, rather than the swinging for the fences and we're going to take this revolutionary new technology, these revolutionary hard use cases like an airport shuttle in a major metropolitan area, which of course is going to be, you know, there's going to be a lot of revenue that's going to be very beneficial from a market perspective, but is really challenging for a lot of dimensions. So rather than trying to jump directly into a mission like that, leveraging kind of the evolutionary perspective, and we worked with a state government where there was an operator in that state that was interested in that really hard problem. And, you know, we ended up getting to, well, why don't we first focus on this one large event that happens in a somewhat rural part of this state and use that as a catalyst. So no, you're not going to have the huge volumes of people, you're not going to necessarily have the huge profit margins, but it's going to open that door and knock down some of those challenges. It's going to engage the public, engage workforce, it's going to prove out the safety, and will pave the way for that. So I think from a revolution perspective and the swinging for the fences, there's also a dimension of the mission evolution in addition to the technology and some of the supporting technology.
I love that you both building towards the next question, so thank you for that. I think the point you mentioned around the mission, I think we're talking really high level, so maybe a little bit, it's a high level discussion in any case. So a niche lower in the magnitude from the perspective of what to do with new aircraft and the actual demand compared to what we want to have a demand. I think if we combine all the total addressable market of all the decks I saw in the last 2 weeks, we get more than the US market as a whole. So a more realistic approach, let's say we go in with evolution and we say, okay, we want to tackle use cases that there is a demand, that the alternatives are not as compelling as currently a lot of market in the mid-mile kind of function. I think Mark can hone on it, or Army-focused DoD budget that going and changing and exceeding, or even if we have a different consumption on VTOL. How can we, as investors, look at the different missions and say, okay, are you ready for that mission from a concept of operation? Are you having the best concept of operation, the best configuration to tackle the current demand, not future demand, that might happen because we're taking the evolution method? How can each of you, and maybe from your perspective, more holistic approach, tackle the next viable use cases that could be certified with the best tools, hopefully?
I guess I'll jump in. I seem to jump in every time, first time. But for us, we have 4 pillars, and I think this should be true for anybody that's getting into this business, advanced air mobility, or any business. You want to, I mean, these are aircraft, right? So they're no good just to fly around. They need to be doing something. They're delivering something. It might be cargo like people or things. It could be a sensor payload, like EOIR camera, LiDAR, electronic warfare package, whatever it is, you're delivering something. So the 4 pillars for us is you have to be delivering something that's really valuable. It has to be going somewhere that's hard to reach. Somewhere, and it has to be time sensitive, so you don't need a runway or you can't do it on a truck or take a long time. And then the 4th thing is people have to be paying a whole lot of money for that right now. That's the market. It's hard enough to succeed. You're trying to buy down risk. You're a startup company, trying to do something new. You want to take all the risk off the table. So if you have those pillars, you're going in a market where you can make money. And the people you're working with will make money because you can never do this alone. Your component providers, the service providers are operating your aircraft if you're not doing it yourself. So for us, that's the no-brainer. So it's high-value payload, time-sensitive, to a place that's hard to reach, where people are paying a ton of money to do that now. So that's not getting you your latte in 20 minutes. For us, it's also not delivering humans because you're taking people out of their car that are 67 cents a mile and trying to charge I don't know what. We don't know what it's really ultimately going to cost per passenger mile. If you're going to fly humans around in the NAS, why don't you fly like a medevac where you're getting like $600 per passenger mile, right? Same aircraft, same certification, same path. We do 550,000 of those deliveries every day in the United States alone. That's a great model, I think. So those are the pillars for us. And then, like I said before, revolutionary technology, but evolutionary market. Make deliveries to offshore oil and gas platforms, replacing a helicopter. Bristow's probably here today, right? They're a sponsor, and others that are doing this right now. There's a huge opportunity in those markets. So for us, that's the path.
So obviously, with our multi-copter type model, we want to focus on short distance market. So for example, air taxis, for the future, but in the current stage, that's not possible because we have, for example, we have to have the barge port everywhere around the city centers as well, which is quite difficult to have, especially city like New York, Tokyo, anywhere. It's congested. So we are focusing on to build the use cases at first through the tourism, EMS, as Medivac is quite high valuable use cases as well. And we also want to focus on the market where the regulations are quite eased on by the Civil Aviation Authority as well. Like for example, GCA in UAE, they're trying to focusing on starting their eVTOL and air taxi business at the first in the world as well. So we are looking into the different use cases in different regions rather than we focusing on, for example, Japan has really tighter regulations as well. So we are going to be flying for the demonstration flight for the Osaka Expo next year, but that's for the demonstration. But we are focusing on what's going to be the implementation stage, going to be the different market on the different regions as well.
Yeah, so nobody buys a technology, they buy a solution to a problem, and that problem can manifest itself in the form of they want to move to a more sustainable future, they want to save time, they want to reduce noise, and of course everybody wants to reduce operating costs. So those are really what we focus on is trying to solve that problem. And so how are we thinking about sort of this mission for the future and how we do it? We're really doing it with a foot kind of in the past and a foot into the future at the same time. And there's really kind of 3, I guess you used the word pillars, Matthew, but three markets, 3 ways we're thinking about moving forward. One is replacing existing aircraft on existing routes. That's simple. The way we've designed our aircraft is as a hybrid, it works with today's fuels. It doesn't need any new infrastructure. Pilot training is the same as it's always been. The routes that we fly are the same routes, the IFR procedures, the approaches, the departures, everything is the same as it is today. So that's kind of the foot in the past, and that's a market that we can grow our business on today, and there's no sort of waiting on regulations, waiting on infrastructure, waiting anything like that. The second one is the foot to the future, and that's, you know, new infrastructure that gets people closer to where they want to be. And that's going to take time to build out new infrastructure, but we can certainly get into these small spaces, and we can do it for less than half the cost of vertical lift aircraft. And so we think that's a compelling value proposition. So, and then the third part is the Department of Defense, and that stuff we can do today as well as things like remotely piloted aircraft, which is kind of a step into the future as well. So we think that risk mitigation strategy of being able to fit in the way things work today, but have a clear path to expanding the market in the future is a solid approach to doing that.
Yeah, and I really like the comment about it. We have to be solving an existing problem. So I think that's the other dimension. I know we talk about demand, but sometimes it really is just what is that problem, whether that's I'm sitting in traffic too long, or I can't get my cargo out, or, you know, another dimension I think that we've seen, and this is again maybe dovetailing into a later question that we had, but around, you know, some of the current events that have been happening. So just within the last year, we've had an incredibly significant number of natural disasters. We've had hurricanes, we've had wildfires out here in the West, and we have seen a huge growth in sort of the attention and discussion about how can these technologies help in both immediate recovery, so going and saving lives, bringing medicine, bringing medication, getting first responders out there, as well as from a longer term, how do we recover, how do we rebuild the infrastructure, and potentially how can we rebuild the infrastructure in a favorable way for some of these new technologies. So I think there's an opportunity, while from a monetary perspective, from a demand perspective, there might not be that much out there. It might be government funds or things like that to get over that, but those types of things I think can help pave the way. Again, going back to kind of the mission and evaluating what are some of the problems that need to be solved, and some of these emergency response, you know, types of things I seem to be emerging as a key near-term use case that we're seeing.
I love it. So let's kind of recap. We started with, okay, what do we want to focus on from lesson learned to the future? We went from revolutionizing to evolutionizing. And we wanted to focus on between the specific use cases that are on the table, the ones that have real demand that we can solve today. From each of your perspective, if you have an anecdote or a specific, let's say, advantage on how things are being done now and could be done better in the future from those specific use cases. If it's in, I think from what I hear here, the emergency use case and the delivery perspective towards the people kind of mid-mile future of infrastructure. And from what we are trying to see as investors, is that something that capital intensity with the current interest environment, future interest environment can be sustained? Because our other OEMs are, as you mentioned, Matthew, in the beginning, spending a lot of money to get there, to revolutionize. We're talking about evolutionize. Is those use cases that you chose in this session now can be something that are compelling enough for us to wait until 2035 or 2030? And if so, with those use cases of emergency to medical delivery to mid-mile transportation, how do you rank yourself as solving those questions towards the vision of ROI in the next 10 years?
Am I starting again? Okay.
I'm looking at you.
So, there's no way to prove a market more than when the entity you want to be your customer pays you to develop the solution that you can have so that they can buy a lot of them. So for us, that's an important proof point. We've raised $15.9 million. We have $17.9 million of government contracts with the DoD, with the Army, with the Air Force, and with the Navy, and with DARPA. And so, like, that is an important proof point, saying, look, we like that smells so good, we want some of that. We're gonna, you don't have the solution we need to buy, we'll help you develop that solution. So to do R&D where you own the IP, you need to own that IP, and you're not giving them all the data rights that allow them to have Lockheed Martin build it for somebody, for you instead of you. That is really important. We see that a lot for our company in the defense industry, and we're seeing it now increasingly in the commercial. We just started to move into the commercial market, and we also have something with the UK Ministry of Defense, but now in the commercial market, we're increasingly moving into that. And nothing to announce right now, but I had a really good meeting on Monday with a company that would probably pay to develop an entirely new clean sheet design of an aircraft that they need for a particular market, just so that they can buy a bunch of them. And so, for us, that sharing that risk, because I don't know how to say this in a polite way, you can sit in a room and get high on your own farts, thinking you know and what the market is, but if your customer is telling you what they want, they know your market way better than you do. They have all the questions you don't even know. You don't know the answers to. You don't even know what the questions are. They do. And so to have them have skin in the game in that way is the ultimate proof point. You align your interests with them. You're partnering with them, and we're all pioneering a new market. None of these markets exist. So to the extent we're replacing some solution with what you think is a better solution, you're doing that for somebody that's using the old way. They know that better than you do. So to connect with those people, to partner with them, and if you can get them to actually provide funding and other ways of investment in training their pilots, providing information, just getting them to deliver you a spec of what they need is profoundly valuable for linear inspection. Like, I don't know anything about that, but they sure do, and what their needs are. And so that's worked really well for us, and it's part of I think any formula for success.
Well, we talk to a lot of the customers, and customer expectations are completely understandable, like what we need. And also, as Connie mentioned, there's a lot of natural disasters happening especially in Japan. Like 1st of January, we had the huge earthquake in Japan. We already started using our drones and our eVTOL technology to help those natural disaster medevac emergency services as well. So there's huge demand on that market. So that's where we can help the market demand as well. Especially from the government perspective, we are not replacing the helicopters at the moment. It's addition to the helicopter services. We are building the much smaller scale eVTOL, so we can land them anywhere in the world, anywhere in the city as well. So we can use for those much needed help for the society as a whole.
So we like to say that our aircraft offers helicopter-like performance for fixed-wing operating costs. And that's really never been able to be done before in the past with traditional technology. And so the technology component of it has really allowed us to do that. And just for reference, for those who don't know, we can take off and land in about a 150-foot ground roll, so about a 300-foot runway with 9 passengers on board and a pilot on a fixed-wing aircraft. Nothing tilts or anything. It's just a fixed-wing aircraft. And so we can't land in all the places a helicopter lands, but we can certainly take a meaningful dent into it. But we can compete admirably on the standard fixed-wing routes, airport to airport. But we also have the ability to land in some places where vertical lift aircraft land. And then in the future, looking at dual-use infrastructure to land even closer to where people want to be and where they leave and where they arrive. So really interesting there. I think if we want to bring new technology to market, particularly if we could focus on the sustainability angle, there's no sense in developing a quote-unquote sustainable aircraft if it doesn't get deployed, if it doesn't move the industry to really being able to take this in. And when you think about the sustainability angle, it's not only the savings on the aircraft, but the industry has to learn how to embrace these aircraft. For example, the lessors have to really be able to figure out what's the residual value on an electric aircraft. No one knows that today. The insurance companies need to be able to assess the risk for that. The mechanics need to know how to learn how to work on an 800-volt electrical system. So all that is an important part of moving the industry towards a sustainable future. And so to do that, we have to have an aircraft that has compelling economics, right? At the end of the day, the economics have to make more sense than a conventional aircraft. Or there'll be very, very limited adoption. There'll be virtue signaling. There'll be a few planes here and there to show that we've got sustainable aircraft. But you really have to focus on that. So that's really a focus for us, is to build an aircraft where the economics make sense, where they say, oh, we want to replace traditional aircraft with this new aircraft because it has all these incredible capabilities and the economics work out. And that, of course, trickles down into multiple different missions, cargo, passengers. The mission for our aircraft is in this 50 to 500 mile, typically 50 to 300 mile range is a sweet spot, which is outside the range of eVTOLs. And so eVTOLs are very complementary to what we do, actually. So if you have a short-range mission where vertical lift truly is necessary, VTOLs are great. If you have a few hundred feet and you want to go hundreds of miles, that's where our plane fits in really well. And so the missions there are complementary.
So I think from my perspective, one thing to add, those were all, I think, great points. When we think about advancing and evolving these use cases, I think it also is important to think about the adjacent and enabling technologies in markets. So AI, I can certainly talk for probably, 30 minutes in and of itself about AI. I know there's a few other sessions, one later today and I think a couple tomorrow, focusing on AI, but there's so much potential for AI, whether that's generative AI, advanced machine learning analytics, et cetera, to really help accelerate some of that advancement. So I think it's worth thinking about that. And then there's charging concepts, these micro reactors, extended reality. There's all these advancements that are being made that maybe aren't technically fully within the aviation domain, but can really help accelerate regulation, the regulatory pieces, the safety demonstration, some of these things. So I think it's important, as we think about this, to think about it holistically with some of those enabling technologies as well.
I think we have 3 minutes. So we are open. Oscar, we can get questions, am I right? Yes. Do we have any questions? Oh, the last one is from me. I'm not in the panel, Let's take the second one. Who wants to take it? Matthew, you're back to the screen.
I can start take the first
Shoot.
one. So I think it will be quite difficult to do the urban sort of a taxi, for example, like air taxi at the day one, to be honest. Firstly, we need the infrastructure to be ready for the eVTOL to operate in any urban areas. But there's like significant challenge with, for example, like urban canyons. Like what's going to be the weather environment factors correlated with the eVTOL operations within the city areas as well. So, for example, like other thing is the fire safety. What happens if battery catches fires? The amount of the batteries carrying on the eVTOL is significant, and it would be quite difficult to extinguish those battery fires as well. So, like, and FPA is like discussing on those matters as well. So we have like a lot of challenges coming from day one. So I think it would be more wise to starting from the rural cargo, for example, or like non-passenger eVTOL operations as well.
So if we're talking aircraft that can carry a few thousand pounds of payload, the answer is yes, you need a certified aircraft for that. I do like the SORA framework, but I don't think there's a regulatory framework to do that for the higher payload aircraft. If that's changed or something new I don't know about, please come grab me afterwards. I'd love to learn more. But that's my current understanding is, whether it's piloted or remotely piloted, there's no framework for remotely piloted aircraft right now in most of the developed world, and there's certainly not in the U.S. So I don't think there's a workaround right now outside of waivers and exemptions where you can do some demos. And the real exciting stuff is happening with the 2 pounds, 3 pounds, 4 pounds kind of payload for deliveries and stuff. But I don't think there's a huge sort of broad-based market opportunity for that right now.
I think the third question here is kind of a little bit try to summarize what we're talking about in this discussion in a really kind of yes or no. And we have a minute, so that's great for us. Where do you see more revenue in urban versus rural? And let's add again, you all have a stake in the game, so I know what you will say, but let's hear you guys.
I think the larger entry into service market is in exurban rural opportunities, just because building in cities, doing anything in cities, there's so many barriers that get thrown up from community acceptance and permitting and noise and everything else. Hopefully, the new aircraft doesn't make permitting any easier, but it certainly makes the noise better. But I think outside of cities, you're going to have less pushback in terms of operating new services.
I'll make my response easy and just say +1 to that. That's exactly what I was going to say. So.
Okay. Yeah.
I think it depends on the market as well. For example, like Dubai, like they want to fly within the air taxi from the day one as well. So there will be strong and really large revenue sort of like expectation from the GCA government as well, like UAE government. So obviously, depending on the market where the actual potential revenues or sources are. So if, like for example, like Dubai, Southeast Asia, where the congestion is quite crucial in the entry into service as well, so that's where they can make money. But for example, like countries like US, Japan, other places, like maybe the rural area would be better for the entry service into the larger revenues as well.
I think we're out of time, but I think it's the wrong question. I don't think that there's a viable model at all the business model doesn't work. But if you had to pick between the two, it would definitely be exurban because the unit economics are much stronger to the thing that you're replacing, the solution you're replacing.
Beautiful. I think we're done, am I right? Yeah. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for the panel, and thank you.